Hi, everybody. And continuing with the theme of mindfulness, our wonderful guest today is a mindfulness practitioner. She's an author, she's a filmmaker, and she is a Brahmin. So we're going to be talking about all those things. Welcome, Priya.
Thank you.
So lovely to have you. I know we had a lovely pre-chat the other evening. Whenever I talk to people who are so spiritual and so connected, it just always gives me thrills and chills. So wonderful to have that experience again. So tell us, Priya, what it's like to, or what it means, is what I should say, to be a Hindu Brahmin.
Sure. Yeah, for me, it was just something that was just a regular part of life. I was born in Bengal, India, and immigrated when I was 7, and we never consumed meat. So I speculate no one in my ancestry has consumed meat. So this was a default, regular part of life to me. It was normal. And so it was more, an experience of what was different when I moved to the US after the age of 7 and was even pulled into a kind of a brawl with in the second grade when a classmate wanted me to eat her chicken instead of the Indian food that I brought to school.
Yeah, kids are great, right? So talk to us a little bit about the faith. I mean, I think that most Westerners who haven't studied other religions, we know that there's polytheism, we know that there's a belief in reincarnation, we know that vegetarianism is in there, but I think we don't really know much. Can you fill us in, please?
Sure. In India, there is the caste system, and then part of it is so the Brahmins are considered like the priestly caste, and we're supposed to be like the upholders of Hinduism. So my father, for instance, could perform weddings, and so he had that capacity as a Brahmin. And the way that I was raised in it was more ritualistic rather than a lot of like philosophical exchanges or talking about ahimsa. So, for instance, we had a puja room in one of the bedrooms in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one of the bedrooms was converted to a puja room, to basically a prayer room. So there were a lot of pictures of deities and statues. So before each meal, I would be asked to go offer food to Krishna, to God. And so I would do that. But again, for me, it was just kind of, as a 16-year-old thinking, well, there's stuff I want to be doing. And I didn't quite always understand why am I doing this? But we did these rituals. My mother was not educated and she was, was more ritualistic. We went on pilgrimages in India to visit, shrines, and then we went to Hare Krishna temples in the U.S. So again, it was more ritualistic versus trying to have philosophical exchanges to learn about Hinduism, about ahimsa. So I try to do some of that on my own in college and beyond.
So what have you learned in college and beyond?
So, my own spiritual journey, I realized as a teenager, I was reading books, new age types of books, Richard Bach, Shirley MacLaine. So I was developing my own kind of sense of spirituality. And then I also looked into, do I want to continue being vegetarian? And so I did research and I decided I did. And I was even interviewed by Vegetarian Times about it. I did speeches um, in debate team. I did original oratory, and I, competed in speeches on vegetarianism that I memorized overnight. So I was this activist on vegetarianism, and the research I did, I did not come across veganism. I did not, understand about dairy, and so that was kind of part of my evolution was, having respect for that part of my heritage, continuing to live that way and not wanting to challenge the way that I was raised in terms of eating meat. And then it was more after I became vegan in 2017, becoming a mindfulness teacher and having to sign the precept to not harm, and then having to really do kind of a deep dive into what does this mean? What does this mean in terms of me being vegan, my ancestry, and how did we deal with dairy? That's become more my evolution.
So, when you were studying mindfulness and you signed this form, my understanding from our conversation the other night was that when you signed it, it included being vegan. But when most people signed it, it didn't include that. Tell us about that.
Right. And so, yeah, that was a very pivotal point in the 2-year program for me was realizing how my classmates were perceiving this. Whereas for me, there was alignment, as a vegan, it made sense that that's part of veganism to not harm. But then I was seeing a lot of discussions from classmates around justifications such as humane slaughter, or their ancestral ways of being, or other justifications. And so I was very struck by this and experienced a vegan microaggression, which I learned about in the program as we studied microaggressions. I realized there are, various vegan microaggressions that we experience all the time. And I experienced that with my mentor, who was dismissive of my story as we discussed what this precept meant for us. And so I felt that I needed a vegan mentor and I requested that, but apparently there was not one for me to have. And so we were asked to go through meetings and exchanges, my mentor and I, to sort of resolve our differences in a sense. So over conversations, over about 6 months, he indicated he felt like he was transitioning from being vegetarian to vegan. And so I realized that my focus in the program was shifting towards what I'm now considering vegan mindfulness. This whole I consider an area of mindfulness, that it's very intertwined. And so that's the direction I ended up going. And after the program, starting to work on a short film called Do No Harm, which is directly from the precept. And I was motivated to proceed on my experience from the program and even going on retreats, like yoga retreats, mindfulness retreats. I would find myself being the only vegan. And so I realized just how widespread a lack of veganism was in the mindfulness community, not just in the teaching program, where one of the teachers is not vegan. And so I found a lot of disconnect in the way that I was taught and in the widespread mindfulness community, and how there is a spiritual bypassing around veganism that I experienced a lot with most of my classmates, 2,500 classmates in the program, and then beyond in the spiritual mindfulness community.
Ah, that's too bad. And that's one of the reasons we founded the Compassion Consortium, because people are in so many beautiful spiritual traditions that have so much to offer the world. And yet there's this disconnect here. So hopefully we can take from those traditions, learn from them, use them for our spiritual growth, and contribute something too as vegans and people who really have reverence for life in forms other than the human. So I know that you were in India studying everything and making your film. So tell us a little bit about that. And I know you're not going to go into any icky detail about sadness of cows and calves, but there is sadness for cows and calves, and if there weren't, we wouldn't be vegan. So tell us a little bit about your experience in India in particular.
Sure. So I went in December of 22 after 15 years. I went to visit my mother in Ahmedabad, India, for 3 weeks, and then also to get footage in the city. And so I visited 4 dairy farms, and I also met the vegan community there. And so I got a lot of footage of the farms, of what it's actually like, and of the community. So to also show us, a sign of hope for the future in terms of the existence of the vegan community there, and to show that we're everywhere globally. Um, and so that was a very promising, positive part of the trip. In terms of what I experienced, I had done some research to learn what was actually happening to cows behind the scene. So I got to see firsthand the reality that we all know of what really happens with cows and their babies, and how we end up having dairy. And that's in my trailer in Do No Harm, just to show how do we have dairy, and how global dairy consumption begins. And so that those elements that we all know are included, that are difficult. So I did see, firsthand that process, and I don't want to get, I suppose, too graphic with that. And one of the dairy farm owners that I visited, she said that this is how it's done. So although it's not legal, um, you know, there is just the process that we know, in terms of how you get dairy, and that is there in India. And a lot of the cows that are just ubiquitous, a lot of them are maybe cows that are considered dry and no longer produce, so they may be let out in the streets. And so they're a normalized part of life that people are used to seeing the cows around. Seen them not be very nice to them. So there is that contradiction of cows being sacred and how they're really treated. But I don't want to say that in any way to shame the Indian community, because again, we know that cruelty is normalized globally in so many ways, and how here in the US too, we can see things but not really, right? That we're not necessarily being mindful of what it is that is being consumed and what is happening behind the scenes.
It's so fascinating to me that there is an almost global addiction to dairy. And in India, where ahimsa, where the sacredness of the cow is part of the tradition, and you mentioned the word illegal. A lot of people don't know that it's only legal to kill a cow in 2 Indian states. And yet, the way that dairy is obtained in any commercial way is the same in US or European factory farming, small farms in India, any farms anywhere. It's just the nature of the thing, and it's something that most people don't understand. To this day, most people think cows just give milk like trees drop leaves in the fall. It's rather remarkable.
It is, yeah, and that word "give" is very common in India. That the activists there try to refute that no, they do not give milk, but I think it's similar with this idea of the happy cow, concept here. And I really wanted to bring this sense of how we've all been conditioned and sort of lied to, right, in a sense globally, and how we've all been raised. And so, like the start of my trailer shows commercials that we grew up with. And so it begins with the TV and the commercials. So I really wanted to have it be not accusatory, not shaming, and just bring it bring awareness to something that has happened with all of us, that we're all in this. We've all been conditioned. I loved dairy. I grew up with it. And, I used to tell myself, even as I was transitioning, considering veganism prior to 2017, I would sort of delude myself thinking that if I got like Indian dairy desserts from the Indian store, then I would somehow be bypassing like cruelty from factory farms because it's different in India. This was before my trip. So um, I think that this is just part of what is happening with all of us, that we get conditioned. And I've also tried to address that in my book, bringing awareness to the conditioning and how mindfulness helps to break through that conditioning when we can slow down and become aware without the defenses of what is really happening, then that is the beginning of shifting.
So tell us again the name of your book and your film. I see that some of this just went up in the chat so that people can find your book and your trailer.
So, my book is called Go Vegan Mindfully. It is on Amazon, Apple, and Google Play. And then, and this can also be found on my website, priacharya.com with one A. And there's a link to the trailer there.
Okay, wonderful. And in just our last couple of minutes, what's your plan? What are you doing? What are you working on now? And how can we help?
Well, launching the book, and I would love to circle back to the uh, short film and try to proceed with post-production. My video editor had felt like we needed more financial support to be able to complete it. We have all the footage. And so that is my next hope, is to finally be able to complete that short film, and hoping that once and if that happens, we could proceed to a full feature down the road that continues the journey.
So you are speaking now to 65 people, and after it goes on YouTube and goes up on our website, there will be lots more into the future. So let's just pretend that instead of 65 people, there were 650,000, and you could leave them with one thought. What would it be?
I would just ask to slow down and consider just small things that can be done. Perhaps, considering plant milk instead of dairy milk, and making small changes and just continuing from there.
I love it. And even those of us who feel we've made some big changes can keep making small changes, and then maybe it'll go from small to big to ginormous, as kids like to say. Thank you
Yes,
so much, Priya.
thank
Thanks for
you.
being with us, and thanks for all that you do.